Let's turn our attention for just a few minutes today to Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, as we talked about earlier, got tied into the trade hubs, or was a hub into the trade systems actually, throughout the world by the medieval era. Southeast Asia, of course, became one of the key hubs along with southern India in the Indian Ocean trade routes. The area of Southeast Asia itself actually had been sheltered from direct contact and conquest from places like China. Between the mountains and the jungle between China and Southeast Asia was pretty well protected, so really the only way that they could make that contact was through the ocean routes and the trade routes, and so that's indeed what happened. And the result is Southeast Asia becomes, as I say, a hub in those routes. Goods, for example, would be shipped out of either Africa or the Middle East. Using the monsoon winds and other prevailing currents, they would travel to the southern tip of India. From the southern tip of India, they would go to Southeast Asia, and then those goods could be picked up in Southeast Asia and brought through the Pacific Ocean into China and other points in Eastern Asia. Likewise, of course, this all could go back the other way from Eastern Asia into Southeast Asia, from there to the southern tip of India, and then, of course, to the Middle East, Africa, wherever the case may be. But the result was a fairly vibrant trade pattern, which actually was established long before the Middle Ages. As we've, again, discussed a little bit already, India established trade contact with Southeast Asia probably as early as the Maurya dynasty in the era before the Common Era. Through that, we see all kinds of cultural diffusion, another concept we've discussed a few times already in class over the last couple of weeks, how the various values and cultures get transmitted from one place to another through this kind of contact. In particular, the thing that we see in Southeast Asia was the introduction of Buddhism and Hinduism into the Southeast Asia culture. Hinduism tended to be the one that became the more dominant of the two, mostly because the rulers liked the structure of Hinduism better. As we talked about, there's a very distinct hierarchy because of the caste system and reincarnation and so on, and that suited the leadership very well in Southeast Asia. Buddhism, being more egalitarian in its belief system and practices, wasn't as well received, at least initially, into Southeast Asia. But the result of this was the inclusion of Southeast Asia. There were several empires that formed in Southeast Asia, probably, for example, there was one that became known as Nam Viet in what is the northern part of modern-day Vietnam. There was the Champa Empire and so on, but probably the largest and most influential of them was the Khmer Empire. The Khmer Empire encompassed a great deal of Southeast Asia and became really quite important. It formed in the era right around 800 of the Common Era and lasted for several hundred years. The Khmer ruled there until about 1431, so the mid-1400s, a roughly 600-year time period. The peak of the Khmer Empire probably was in around 1200 or so. At that time, in about 1200, the ruler of the Khmer Empire was a guy by the name of Jayavarman VII. Now, don't worry too much about that name, spelling it or remembering Jayavarman, but he was the leader in about 1200 and is notable because he ruled from a capital city, a complex that was known as Angkor, Ngkor, a very, very large, substantial city, one of the largest cities in the entire world for that time period. It is estimated that the city of Angkor probably housed somewhere between 750,000 and 1 million people in an area roughly 386 square miles in size. So we're talking about an extremely extensive. One of the important legacies that Jayavarman left behind when he ruled in the Khmer Empire was the construction of a vast temple complex, which is what you see in this picture. It is known as Angkor Wat, Angkor Watt. It was built in the capital city of Angkor, and it is a massive, massive temple complex which is dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. Again, demonstrating the impact of cultural diffusion of how Hinduism began to influence and control the Khmer Empire. This particular complex is really a wonderful example of the Hindu culture, and in a couple of minutes we'll look at a video where you can see it a little bit more closely. As you look at the video, take a look at the ideology behind this complex's design, its sheer vastness, the architectural styles, the artwork, and so on, and you can see that Hindu influence throughout. Eventually, this whole thing was lost when the Khmer Empire was conquered and defeated in the mid-1400s. Eventually, the jungle kind of reclaimed Angkor Wat, and it disappeared and was lost for a few hundred years. And then in the mid-1800s, it was rediscovered and it was cleared out. And so you can see the complex, as you see it there in that picture today, having been kind of reclaimed from the jungle. But the Hindu influence is really strong. The key to this, of course, though, also is the contact with the Muslim world. We talked and have been talking about the expansion of Islam and its influence and the trade impact and how it brought the rest of the world, including Southeast Asia, into its sphere of influence. The Muslims really came to Southeast Asia around the 12th, 13th centuries, the last years of the Abbasid Empire, and we had said that they were the ones who made the connection all the way through to the Pacific. This is really where it came from. Probably less impact on the Khmer Empire than a little bit further south. The real dominant Muslim influence is on the southern part of Southeast Asia, most notably probably Indonesia. Indonesia became Muslim territory. Actually, to this day, it harbors the largest number of Muslim people, the greatest Muslim population in the entire world for any single country. We often think of the Middle East nations as being the focus of Islam, but the largest number of Muslim people live in Indonesia, of all places. The Islamic world made this contact in the 12th and 13th centuries, created trade colonies and communities and so on under that influence. And it was really there more than up in the northern part of Southeast Asia where the Khmer were that we see that Muslim influence. The Khmer Empire faced other problems, some of them of their own making, environmental issues, for example, massive deforestation. They just depleted resources and damaged their ability to survive as a society. They faced other issues as a result of that too. With deforestation comes problems with water control and loss of water and so on. But probably the biggest threat they faced actually was from the Buddhists, and that is indirectly a result of the expansion of the Muslim world. In 1398, we will talk about this tomorrow, a guy by the name of Tamerlane invaded northern India and conquered parts of the Delhi Sultanate and so on, and when he did so, he really destroyed the Buddhist world there. The Buddhist temples were destroyed, the monasteries were torn down, Buddhists were driven out of India, never really returned, and so I guess it's somewhat ironic that the birthplace of Buddhism has almost no Buddhists. The Buddhists were forced elsewhere, and so we see a lot of the Buddhists in Southeast Asia instead. One of the groups that became Buddhist particularly were the Thai, which eventually becomes the people that settle in what is modern-day Thailand. The Thai people, Buddhists, ended up in conflict with their Hindu brethren, if you will, in the Khmer Empire, and in the early mid-1400s finally defeated them, and as a result, Southeast Asia became dominantly Buddhist, and Hinduism, like that which influenced Angkor Wat, kind of fell off to the side and ceased to be the mainstream of Southeast Asia.